have also ground discussion, context of discussion, what's the fact that it's not starting the end. Sorry, I was that it's so starting the Edition of Professorial Chats. So yeah, because just like those sentence, is a record to students and apart. Of course, the very first one is entitled Proactive Community Nutrition in Conversation with Extalgia and Wombiture. So what we have done in getting the title of this first presentation is to bring together some of the areas of concerns of the professors that we intend to celebrate today. It is not my duty to, I will just introduce them now, but somebody else's duty to actually read the citation. So I like to introduce to us in no particular order, or in such a ruptured order. What do I mean by ruptured order now? Professors Folake Samuel. I also like to present to us Professor Senayon. So we tend to celebrate the next part of the school by having some conversations around the contributions of scholarship. It's not my fault having this conversation, at the same time getting to its rising chat, which is supposed to see out of the so without wasting any time, I'd like to invite my friend, I did it to let's see the shows of one of the opposition which was and I like some of our little examples of conversation is one of the nutrition as a beautiful foundation for human and where the idea of nutrition the other is conservation of local food. Like the point of reality and perspective between us, our food, backwards, our past, our future. Olorunyomi, the research professor in our cultural and media studies program, obtained his PhD in African literature from the University of Ibadan. His specialization and research include textual analysis, structural monitoring, and performance cultures, covering oral and monitoring, print and electronic,
Film and New Media in Africa and the Black Sola. Phantom Director of the University Media Center, as well, former postgraduate of IAFGI, where published in local and international outlets. Professor Olorunyomi has participated over the decade in conferences and seminars across Africa and the Black diaspora, including Nigeria, Ghana, Benin Republic, Burkina Faso, Senegal, South Africa, and Brazil, to mention a few. He has also participated in seminars under the auspices of News, Copenhagen, Denmark, Harvard Global Seminar, Harvard Austria, and WIU, Macomb, Illinois, USA, among others. As his research engagement in the last 30 years have spanned West Africa, Caribbean, Mesoamerica, and North America, where he taught Black aesthetic continuity and ruptures at Northwestern University, Everston. He has also developed research and factors relating to the possibilities of intersecting digital technologies with the earliest phases of memorialization as a critical enterprise in futurity and self-narrativity, conceptualized in his volume, Wombiture. In the midst of all this, Professor Olorunyomi also finds time to pursue sunlight, laughter, and escape from institutions of containment as he plays with the Afrolinks jazz and highlight band, where he experiments with his old bass guitar. Thank you, sir. Professor Senayon Olaoluwa. Senayon Olaoluwa is the first professor of diaspora and transnational studies at the Institute of African Studies, University of Ibadan, Nigeria. He is also the inaugural director of the TED Fund, Center of Excellence for Diaspora Studies at the University of Ibadan. He studied English for his honors at the then Ogun State University, now Olabisi Olubanjo University, Agoiwumi. He also had his Master of Arts in English with literature emphasis from the University of Ibadan and obtained his PhD in African literature from the University of Witwatersrand, South Africa, from Professor Senayon Olaoluwa's multidisciplinary research expertise has broadly drawn upon the notion of diaspora as an umbrella concept that describes experiences that are suggestive of not being home in both literal and figurative terms. Such notions include migration, transnationalism, globalization, cosmopolitanism, backpacking, migrancy, exile, transgression, mobility, modernity, dislocation, dispersal, among others. Over the years, his major research focus has been defined by engagement with and interrogation of most of these concepts and practices in culture, ethnography, literature, film, and music with respect to Africa and its diaspora. He has examined not only the mobility and migration of humans across time and space, he has also scrutinized the figurative dynamics of mobility in relation to passages of time, knowledge, theories, memory, cultures, ideas, text, practices, sexuality, narrative, history, power, and ecology. His theory, Extalgia, describes the trauma of being left behind in the concept of migration and the creative response of transcendence that the condition inspired. The theory also underscores the limits of transcendence while advocating for the development viable institutional system of support to cater to the vulnerabilities of the left behind the world over. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can we give another round of applause to Mr. Kumi Adeleke? Thank you very much for declaring So we've taken the citations of the three professors that we have before us to chat with this evening. The next point is to take presentation from the professors. We like to know what is wrong, we like to know the area of research. Let's have some area. So we like to be of that to sit down. Yes. So Professor Olorunyomi, please would like to take your seat. Right? We can't just use Professor Olorunyomi, so Professor Folake Samuel. Thank you for honoring us by being here in first place. Yeah, thank you very much. So we'll take the presentations one after the other, right? I guess we have. So the last week we are working to celebrate for another professor who is going to be the moderator. You might just like to guess. Just the professor will be here, nice. Before we get to that point, let's take presentation by the professors. I think we have 15 minutes each. I don't know if it's going like that. But I'm scared that the few professors experience to talk and take 1 minute. So why don't you just do 10 minutes? 10 minutes each. I think. Okay, fine. 15. So when it's 5 minutes to end, I'll let you know. Since what we have is a conversation among different concepts. Okay? From proactive nutritional pattern to Wombiture and Extalgia. Let's start with Professor Folake Samuel to open the floor.
Not only.
Sorry. Professor Folake Samuel. You know, there's a way place.
No, it's said on the
Okay, fine. So we'd like to have some kind of discussion there and then. So she makes the presentation. The other two professors, Professor Senayon and Professor Olorunyomi, we react to our presentation and we see the efforts throughout the areas of the section between our work and what was. We believe all of these are connected. So we start straight away with Professor Folake Samuel. Thank you very much.
I want to thank the organizer of this program. First, let me say that corridor discussion and all those important discussions are the salient point in university. And I grew up in this university, you know, knowing this kind of interactions. But that over the years, conversation. Yeah, he's trying to stay afloat among those of us left behind. So, because so I'll be rich so that I don't go beyond that time. But so that my allowance does not be equal, I would like to essentially recognize the environment. Yeah, so I want to sincerely thank Dr. Philip Olaoluwa for considering this idea in the scholarly work, and to his midwives, Dr. Kudus, Dr. Senayon. I think thank you for bringing together this platform for us to have a rich academic conversation that showcases the scholarly identity of each of us here, thereby positioning us as study that in this field. I'm particularly excited at the insight that generated at the intersections of knowledge of our very different fields of research. Truly, as my biological father, first academic mentor always says, knowledge is one. So in the next 10 minutes or so, I would like to highlight to this distinguished audience who I am in the nutrition space, and also present an overview of my research so far. What I will discuss will be limited to a small portion of soup that God has helped me to cook this past couple of decades for my scholarship, but to provide enough flavor for you to enjoy my intellectual activities. I realized that this is a wider audience that I'm used to. It's a mixed audience from a variety of disciplines, so I will refrain as much as possible from technical jargon. So in advance, please pardon my linguistic if it deviates from the scientific and academic norm that we are used to university discussion. Yet today, I am more concerned about how to make my work accessible to other communities. When I was first approached to partake this program, my first reaction was panic. And it's becoming a big word, Extalgia and Wombiture. I wondered how to get it to my own town in that community. From those words, community nutrition. It's what we all know. So I also got review of mine. But later I sat down to reflect. I reflected about the respect I have for humanities, for the profoundness, creativity, and complexity. So I told them. So I now my area of community is that focusing on the staff in writers. In my work, I go looking around our people, various communities, around over this and I know the very for pregnant old age. I think this book is nutrition starts with the every everything was clean from this that was sitting and what the child is there, that will become and program the child, setting the stage for lifelong. By building a strong foundation, the material can take the foundation. The time has come and take the foundation. So this is from which we made the part of the theorizing that problem that is go not just evidence. There is an example of the example. We have different forms of from any and it shows that 40 years after the war, the children that were in the home during the war had a higher risk of developing so that gravity is and high blood pressure. So what is implied that gravity was given to mother to prevent malnutrition during pregnancy and also during the because what is that? To really take care of national malnutrition. Because we are moving from that I was micronutrient deficiency and diet intake others do not eat, adolescents, and of course, elderly. So we are finding that there is still a high prevalence of different and a lot of pregnant women are not baby. So what is happening is that children also at least not just for being from the womb, they are also at risk of developing adulthood. So to address some of these problems, we have used food science research to develop tests and promote nutritious foods for infants and pregnant mothers, and we have used different technologies that are also suited for household and community level utilization. We have also worked with a host of collaborators to explore the nutritional vulnerability of children in different communities. Not just children, but also look at left behind groups in the community, like out of school apprentice girls. We look at school girls with learning and hearing disabilities, and so on and so forth. I would like to also talk about the Habitat 2 project, which we carried out in Osun State, where we fed some children for 18 weeks using yellow cassava, just trying to prove the concept that we can quantify our cassava, we can improve vitamin A status and improve the life of children and adults when they are born. Let's also look at the second one. The first one was the second one is looking at what is for. Yeah, we want to expand the persistence and transition. My emphasis is that we need to intervene and invest in our local food systems. Really want to have progress in addressing nutrition in all its forms in Nigeria. Please give me a win. Then I'll go to my people are also more interested in international fast food. We have moved from simplicity to complexity of processed food products. What has some benefits in terms of convenience, food preservation, reduced food harvest losses, and so on. There remains several questions with respect to the public health implications of this. During the pre-independence days, the colonialists got new diets as well as new cultures. And so over time, the transformation in Nigeria's national food when it became easy to observe that there are new foods. Globalization has really played a role in this, and the global foods have taken our palates. What are global foods? Foods and beverages that have originated from specific cultures but are now consumed worldwide. So I'll mention some of them and start thinking what you are putting out of this in activities. Bread, biscuits, popcorn, yogurts, oats, fried rice, noodles, samosa, ice cream, tea, salad, spaghetti, macaroni, pizza. These are global foods. They originated from some places, but they are now everywhere. Happily, we have some global foods that emanated from Africa too. Coffee, jollof rice, and peppers. These are also global foods. So globalization is not a one-way process, but a complex issue in education, and Nigeria. Thank you. Modernization of food culture occurring simultaneously. So this essentially concept of education. It is unprecedented everywhere. The scale and pace of that concept. And what does it mean? It talks about moving away from the traditional and Western associated of people. And having been compared to the other regions, West African diet is the most traditional. But they are celebrating in that tradition. And that acceleration is related to an increase in health problems, including when we were young. It was kind of yeah, but now it's so common. And that is because our diet has changed. There is heavy reliance on food, such as rice, which has occupied a high place in our daily life. We now have fast food. While the consumption of food and vegetables is not very common in the next 1 minute. To put the issue of urbanization in perspective, Nigeria is growing in terms of population, more than 200 million, and the proportion of people living in the urban areas has increased from 1 in 3 in 1991 to 1 in 2, and it is projected that by 2025 we have more urban than rural. What that means is that millions of Nigerians are joining the education transition. So the question is, how do we feed our population sustainably and healthfully? How rapidly can we change our food systems? And save it for this sometimes in Nigeria. How can we redesign our food systems? And I'm trying to emphasize the connection between our past and the importance of preserving traditional practices for the sake of our health and well-being. I want to bring us into a conversation between the old and the contemporary, all the preparation for the healthy future growth here. And those who are in the room, and those who are living our healthy traditional culture behind, not only that we are living our traditional culture behind. I want to read what Olaoluwa said. We must not be contradiction. We must not take the foreign inflicted on us hook, line, and sinker. However, we must leave ourselves open to the ideas and developments from the globalized world, but our foundation of what we hold dear must be secure and strong enough to resist unsavory and negative influences from outside. This brings me to the last minute of my presentation, and that's about the third bucket of thoughts. It is very good. I want us to have more time to chew on the full discussion from Wombiture and Extalgia. This aspect, this third bucket of my thoughts, is just a celebration and appreciation of the aspects of my research that have enjoyed methods, tools, and perspectives from humanities and social sciences. I have used methods such as co-creation, human-centered design, citizens research in recent times. Around the time of COVID-19, when everybody was locked in, our research team called FRUGIS was busy implementing a community-based intervention study to promote the consumption of fruits and vegetables among low-income communities in Nigeria and Vietnam. We sought to create some innovative food systems interventions that will help these economically left behind people to eat fruits and vegetables. You know, we say fruit and vegetable is expensive. So this is what we did. We explored several interventions using food coupons. We used promotional campaigns in the mosque and church. Involving vulnerable people, community people, can lead to innovative solutions that are contextually relevant. The key takeaways. And 3, let's one another, methods and tools from science for your attention.
I like the first one. So we just let's take.
That's the tyrannical power of the mic. The moderator is also a dictator. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Professors in the house, Professor Adepoju would like to recognize you. Welcome, sir. Professor Adepoju is from the Department of Human Nutrition. Thank you so much for the support. We've always had conversations across. Sincerely, I thought we're just going to sit here. Let me make this confession before we get started. Do I also have 15 minutes? Great. So I thought we would just sit and then there will be Q&A and then we'll be able to tell some stories. But Professor Samuel has, I must confess, rattled me, having organized the thoughts in such a formal way. I am so intimidated now, and I have no idea where to start from. But, yeah. So I would crave your indulgence to tell some personal stories, and I guess maybe in the process, I would be able to connect with her presentation and the overall focus of this chat. Migration has always been fascinating to me, right from my childhood, and especially the metaphoric form of migration, because my childhood was such a complicated one. At the metaphorical level, because of the everyday symbolic movement. I remember when we were in primary 1, for instance, our head teacher, Mr. Pio Nita, introduced to that for me was also a form of migration, because most of us encountered Yoruba when our parents enrolled us in school. We had our mother tongue. Never mind, I have Yoruba surname, but I'm not even Yoruba. That's another angle to the metaphoric migration. And so we began to read, count 1 Okon, 2 AG, and then, and so forth, until one day we got to 29 Okandilokon. And then he paused and said, ìtumọ̀ yìí ni wípé ó ká dé ọgbọ̀n, because 29 was Okandilokon. But we didn't know that the next number in English was 30. And then we all shouted with excitement, then, sir, let's get to Ogbon in English. He said, no, it was not possible that day. It would take coming back to school the following day to get to Ogbon. So, and then said, whoever day will not get to Ogbon in English. So it became for us a beautiful kind of suspense. So on our way home, we began to have this conversation in our language about the headmaster saying we will get to Ogbon in English the following day. And so everybody went to school and promised, everybody went back home and promised to return to school the following day. And then we got to school the following day and the man just said, 30 or more. But it was fascinating to us, and we always remember because he did it in such a mnemonic way. All of us in that set will always remember. People like the grandmaster. He was such a dramatic, headmaster, and we had always wondered why the headmaster was the one ending us in primary 1 and not primary 6. I mean, we knew all that later. Another form of metaphoric migration that was fascinating to me during my childhood was that of staying in a church compound where we spoke my mother tongue, our mother tongue, and the church was also in that compound. So it would take less than 1 minute to move from my father's house to the church. And then the moment we entered the church, everybody became Yoruba. So it was like Jesus Christ was Yoruba. And the moment we stepped out, the conversation would begin in Ogu, my mother tongue again. And I couldn't just deal with this, and we just had to go. And then one day, for reasons best known to my parents, they decided to take me to my maternal grandfather, whose Ogu name had been overshadowed by a Yoruba nickname, Olaoluwa. And so I woke up one day as Samuel Senayon Azimagba. And then it occurred to my master that he would just take me to school and enroll me for the first time. And so he took me from home that day as Samuel Senayon Azimagba. And I returned home as Samuel Senayon Olaoluwa. And I mean, these are my stories, and for that reason, anything that has to do with migration has always been fascinating, to me, and I would try to make sense of it. And because this conversation is around Extalgia, I cannot begin in the middle of things. How did I arrive at Extalgia? And so, the other grand metaphoric movement for me was negotiating transition from being a farmer to being an educated person. I remember even after my master's, I was publicly accused twice of fraudulently identifying with educated people in my community. Because to those people, this guy didn't go to school. Why does he try to identify with the educated? We know the educated people in the community, but we know that this guy is a dark, illiterate farmer like us. Why does he do that every time? And so today, people say I'm a professor. There is still this guy who says, ask him, when he sees me, can he open his mouth and tell me that he's educated? And when people ask him, but how do you say, ask him? We were farmers together. We were farming together. He never went to school. So, and this again for me speaks to the complexity of migration in itself. And so, consciously or unconsciously in school, I began to take interest in, forms of movement. And literature became particularly fascinating for me in the university. And then I did my long essay that had something to do with what I would call, what Onyi would call the movement of transition. The critique, the movement of African criticism in literature. And I came to UI, and during my MA research, I did something on the growth, the development, and reputation of Odi Agbenu as a poet. That is another kind of mobility, the metaphoric sense. And by the time I went for my PhD, it was really very clear. I was very much interested in the politics of exile, an aspect of migration in African poetry. And I came back and hoped that I would one day become a professor of English. And then one day, Professor Olorunyomi
called me from nowhere. I was at Osun State University, asking me to see him over a weekend at the Institute of African Studies. And I showed up, and he brought out a document and asked me to take a look at it. That it's a new program just approved by the University Senate for the Institute of African Studies. So what do you think? Innocently, I said, oh, it looks so well. And then he then said, and I think you can head this program. And I'm like how? So, and that is how I found myself here. So sometimes in my Diaspora and Transnational Studies program, when students say, but okay, this thing is too complicated, I say, go and find out from Professor Olorunyomi, because I also found it complicated. I didn't know why he brought me here. And so I'm just trying to cope. And so in the course of paying greater attention to migration, literal and metaphoric, what I have discovered at one level is that there is that commonality of migration to everything we do. And in trying to talk about human relations or the history of great nations, powers, empires, and kingdoms, first, I discovered that among other things, it's always been a perennial struggle between early and late arrivals. Today, everybody talks about Olaoluwa. And once a sitting governor of Osun State attended a convocation ceremony at Osun State University and then said, blah, 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 all the protocols, and finally, on the descendants of Olaoluwa. And everybody said, hey. One man, another Yoruba man, was sitting next to me and then said, I want you one share descendants of Olaoluwa in Yoruba. And at that point, you will remember Olugbo in Ondo State, who continues to say that his own ancestors were in Ife before Olaoluwa got there. Who interact with the Hausa, they will tell you that Bayajida was not quite the progenitor, that the people had always been there, except that when Bayajida came, they faced this challenge of that snake terrorizing them. He killed it, and everybody now says, you are our leader. And that is problematic for some people. When you begin to talk about the British Empire, you see it's about late arrivals taking over everywhere, and it goes on and on and on. And then in contemporary times, there is this, power relation kind of dynamic between the left behind and the mobile lives, so that we ascribe a lot of power to those who move, because it is about the affordances in so many ways. And in literature, in economics, in politics and everything, there is so much attention paid to those who are mobile, because even when it is time to talk about the people at home, it is the mobile lives who return home to still write homecoming from their own perspectives, because of the question of power. What the program at the Institute of African Studies has done for us, and in my own research, is to begin to interrogate that exclusive ascription of power and, if you like, dignity to those who are mobile. What happens to the people they leave behind? And in the process of that, I have discovered that if we are talking in the present age about the imperative of equity, especially in migration experience, it is also as important for us to consider the affective deficit inherent in the lives of the people we leave behind. And that is what I have called extalgia, that suffering, that trauma, that notion of grief that describes the feelings, the sensibilities of the people we leave behind. How do we account for that? The Red Cross, the UNESCO, the UNO, and so many other international organizations pay a lot of attention to the challenges and travails of, if you like, displaced individuals and groups. Isn't it time we began to look at how we might do same for those we leave behind? And that is exactly, what I am looking at the moment. And there is a way, in the end, it speaks to the whole idea, as it were, of migration, of how food defines who we are from the womb, Wombiture, and how that movement itself fits into the whole idea of the global foods that they keep on moving. Because when people move, so many other things move with them, including food and so many other things. The moderator has been so uncomfortable with my useless stories. And at this point, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you all.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. No, I'm not uncomfortable. I'm just trying to behave like typical time managers. Any moment to go beyond my limits, there'll be a movement in my stomach, in my body. So that's not that kind of movement. Anyway, so we go now to Professor Olaoluwa. We take your presentation in 14.5 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we return to this gratitude again. Dr. Produce, Dr. And of course, Dr. Adeleke and another one too. It's not a shut up, I'm the director. And I know when your exams come up. Well, from humility. Yeah, and of course, the arrowhead, of course, I see you also about support which causes all the time. Ideas, ideas and ideals globally. Personally, anyway, and on the fringe of this project. So, and the spirits behind it. Sometimes looking is a grammar, and sometimes it's people. And I'll try to do that. But at the very beginning of this, we were served a good meal by Professor Samuel. And it's just in the very nature of things that women tend to do things more correctly. Partly also because they factor in a lot more than the simplicity of we generally factor in things. And I'm not saying this as emotive or trying to encourage anyone. I mean, just hunter gatherers very privileged to they don't engage in brain too much. Just yank something like see how it we know how this things work. So I also like to follow up what can be better and greater and more nourishing than what your mother eats, or how do you put it? What your mother ate. My mother didn't do too well then. I mean, I mean, you can see how sickly I have been. There is something not right about it. I'll prove this like 10 I said. And I remembered, now you have created a family crisis. I remember that much later when they said we should stop eating all these cellulite and breads, there was so much of that at home. Family was also partaking in that. And I'm just wondering how much of breastfeeding, because I don't recall myself being breastfed. No, to be candid, I recall myself, with all of these other things that you have in breakfast like you do today.
Just give it.
So that's something that I'll pick up. Unfortunately, she's late. But I should also be we also in the past. So these are part of the kinds of things I'm wondering about in Wombiture. Trying to ensure that we discourage starting narratives ingredients. And I think some the very fact that we accounting for longer narratives. I do not like to say beginnings because one beginning is just the middle of like the biological narrative. And to call something the beginning is happening to say that it's the end or the beginning of time and space. You know, sometimes that's a bit difficult. So I'll just say, as much as possible, we should empower narrative with earlier beginnings if we have those narratives. Because latter narratives, the way cheat happens, the way falsehood happens, it will eclipse a bit of the past. So one way to eclipse your narrative, if I want to take over your life, is to say that the story begins only from my own narrative and things of that nature. So that's the metaphorization for me for what Professor Samuel, Olaoluwa, and myself are trying to do. The second one I like to raise again, food nurtures. And that is physical, that is physiological, and those are the details. But I recall also back in the Bible, we are reminded that there are two different kinds of food. One might be material, and one might also be at psychological spiritual level. One shall not live by food alone. So there's also the spiritual food. So I think at that level of the conceptual, we can also begin to think of other layers of this food. So the food I seek to, first enculturing, because as a child, you've been nourished with Professor Samuel's nutrition and the best of it. But apart from that, when you start getting encultured, when the mom puts a hand on you in the womb and the rest, that's where I begin from the womb chop. And honestly, it's not a big term. It's just I called Dr. Tella to help me give a better way to explain this, and he called my attention to the fact that basically Wombiture is an extension, isn't it? Or it's an extension of that same lexical item. Do you understand what I'm saying? And that just suggests that I add many things to it. It could just be the culturing as what culture, as literature, and as any other form of extension that you could have. Okay, so the culturing that happens right from our womb. Child, encourage a child to wake up, all kinds of things. And in my own case, I benefited from experimenting with my child because I started this in 1996, and by the time she came, I got all the gadgets and all that. I made her speak a few weeks after and it was treated. She actually started pronouncing sounds. I started imitating her own sound. Because it was constant and all that. She said, and at that point, my wife said, Shola, listen. Because this was happening with a child I said, hey, please just don't stay with us here this anymore. And which was okay, she could sleep. And while the child was not sleeping, I was just doing all kinds of things with the child. And she was beginning to do things that it was also burdensome to me. But I think it was also coupled with I was so deep into this and some reflections. I was saying, sure. I should say, who are those? This is 2 a.m. Who are these? Where are these people in this house? So I was banned from portraying that. Well, you understand? But I'm just saying that what so the order and nomenclature of narrative itself. I've talked about that, you know, the materiality of those early creations in terms of our earliest beginnings. Okay, I say earliest beginnings, not the beginning. I go to another earlier beginning because even in the scripture, you know that what we learn in the Bible is, and I'm not saying I'm taking the Bible as a holy scripture, I'm taking it as literature. And I'm saying I can justify that narrative of with the signs of the fact that there were other creatures. I mean, for instance, we know that the crocs, you know, our elders, I mean, crocodiles and the rest of them, you know, they are elders, isn't it? So we should learn, for instance, to know when we say and all that to these people. They were here before us. So I'm saying that the material life of physical geography and the rest of it was there before us. So that's all I'm saying, that those are also other wombs of the earth, the fecundity of the earth, the planet, and the rest of it. Please just move. Okay, your notion, okay. Who told you to not so fast? But it's all right. Okay, I'll move on to the notions. So the conception unborn as part of the womb, right? The conception Wombiture and the rest. The unborn is not just the child that is not born. Discourses that cannot emerge. I mean, I've seen a lot of you saying you can, I mean, you are the best of Christians, and you're saying you can jail and shoot a lesbian. You are silencing probably an unborn notion or concept or idea. You needn't agree with it. But Christ did not agree to their stoning. So what I'm saying is there are a lot of conversations unborn around that. So don't let the two agitated about things that may just be emerging. The whole idea of nation state is so certain to some people that Palestinians will never have a home. It was so certain to people that South Africa will never be free. So this is the kind of unborn and general imagining. So it's not just next. Let me just get over with this. The potential of this perspective as foundation for future theories here. That is when you remove it just from the materiality of the whole. Many other things can. So we can be very quite attentive with ourselves, can be kinder. Unborn here begins with the human context, but goes beyond. Yeah, we already talked about that. Next. Yeah, silence. We should also study silence and the silence. Okay. Those conversations of the house help, okay, of women, of the vulnerable people, etc., etc. I think they are key, at least for ethnography. Let's listen to them. Those silences. Which one is this again? The digital age and the current era of artificial. Okay, fine. It's an extension of that conversation. Next one, please. Reflection on relationship between nature and we've talked about this. Let's move on. There are 3 items which I want to use to cap, and I'll do it. No. No. I want to cap in a particular way, please. You're not concluding for me. Yeah, that's it. You didn't have to skip it, please. Yeah. So this is how I want to end. I mean, this is how I want to end the lecture. So I've been able to demonstrate that unborn can be literal and be a trope. Okay? I'm saying the literal can be primary womb, secondary womb, and tertiary womb. I will not extend. As a conceptual extension of primary, secondary, and tertiary orality. And I think it's demonstrable. The last one is this, the truth, the conceptual unborn and the agency of unborn. Thank you.
it's very essential that we underscore the agency of the unborn. At this point, before we go to the next phase of this event, maybe give all of them applause. Thank you very much. We'd like to say we have about 41 participants online. So I see that there's a kind of doubling of presence. Some are here and are still online, minus those people who are here and are still online. I don't know what they're trying to do anyway. Being in two places at the same time. But maybe it's related to being unborn. I don't know. So fine. So we are thank you very much for Dr. Awale Osheni, Komolafe, Leye, a number of them, Godwin Bamsa, Esther Olaoluwa, and quite a host of them are good friends there. So thank you very much. We also like to, that was an omission from the start. We're sorry about that. We'd like to again roundly welcome Dr. Samuel. Thank you for coming, sir. And then we have Professor Adepoju with us too. So I like to come back to, this does not look like a table, but let's assume it's what they call high table around there. So for a moment, we call this the high table, because the lowest point there. So I like to find a way of populating this. So we go to the next phase of our program, which is going to be a panel discussion. This particular panel discussion around the subject of community nutrition, Extalgia and Wombiture would be moderated by another professor. So I'd like to call on Professor Dr. Kudus Adebayo. Take that seat. And yeah, so we will moderate this particular session. I guess I'll check at my time. I think you have, you know how many. So I hand over to Dr. Kudus Adebayo. Yeah.
Kind words and your masterful handling of the program so far. And before I do anything else, I'd like to thank the esteemed professors here for taking the time to share the idea. Best always that consequences that could be positive or negative. And in a sense, my understanding is that there's a bit of negativity when we think about extalgia, in terms of individuals having, and this is also a consequence of origin not being nurtured properly. and leading to this kind of crisis, right, that we're talking about, nostalgia, people being left behind, and the kind of pathological manifestations that happen as a result of that. There's also interesting, right, that opportunity, that something that is damaged can be improved and get working again. So I see these interlinkages, across conversations. But then a lot of questions, can come up, and I like the idea of, this about, that man shall not live by food alone. So that got me thinking about how feeding and mental health resilience, are connected, in a very interesting way. And not just about the young, right, that we can think about, but also about the elderly. If the notion of mental resilience, has been distorted, from the womb, there's also that challenge, that we can begin to anticipate, in adulthood, among young people, that kind of grief. If you like, if you want to use the language of the Senayon in terms of aspiration, nostalgia. So that's connection, that one can think about. I'm also curious, so I'm starting to let's talk about return to nutritional tradition. There's one kind of nutrition that's also ongoing, where we are a pregnant woman, particularly docents, mothers, afford right? That becomes a crisis of structure. People who are issue of nutrition from physical health to serious attention of return to nutritional traditions. We also know that situation is also getting worse and worse. So it's just down. People who are so I'm seeing a lot of issues, that also create a crisis on the womb itself, because it's not so bad ideas. The kind of ideas that we expected, from just imagine, also disrupted as a result of this crisis of course that we are so that I think is an issue. So I don't know how what that's going to be, but I have a general question, which I would like to response on, very briefly. And that is the question around capacity to cope. The capacity to cope with emergent futures or being left behind. Emergent futures, from the point of view of what I would call mental nutritional health, capacity to cope with emergent futures. How cope with emergent futures? When we're talking about mental health disease, because we're talking about crisis, there's a lot of crises also beyond migration, everyday issues, well, the real crisis unfolding before our very eyes, and people are still there's somewhere in Abuja now, still trying to find interesting meanings of making it tough. So how can we talk about nutritional or mental health resilience for nutritional quality in the context of crisis? Is that possible? So I just want to get your reaction on that, and I'm sure some people online and how to take the questions to ask. But I just want to put this out there and see so I would like to start from if you want to put this. Right. So it's about talk about your work is about wombiture and future, right? Womb and future, connection between womb and future. And how can we begin to think about mental resilience from the womb, you know, in relation to planning and anticipating a future that is still involved? How can we nurture the womb for the crisis of the future and, of course, the current that we're talking about?
Okay, thanks so much. As we were just speaking, it struck me that I would still like to stick to the two dimensions of, you know, the materiality and the spiritual again. Obviously, in times of social crisis, as we find ourselves in, material social crisis, and very quite interesting economic policies. I have always thought that I really don't bother that people still so people will be impoverished, and because they're impoverished, the material condition of the next generation will also be impoverished. That's the very first one. It affects the whole in that sense. The spiritual dimension to it, however, and the philosophical dimension to it, which you cannot touch, is also that the atmosphere is poisoned. I mean, I haven't seen the kind of the lowest of classes among the two groups as of other than at this point in time. So I take also that as the womb of the future of intergroup relations. Yeah, and that in itself is already a poison stream. And how long that is going to take, I really don't know. Okay, so I think Dr. Kudusi's intervention here is actually very, very key, so that it can help us to have a sense of the potential futurity of the things that we think is ordinary and immediate to us. It has a futurity that, you know, can go far, far, far beyond us. The last one I'd like to say is that if it is true, and of course it is true, whether it's true of whether the specific issue of our petroleum product or the rest is what I'm not sure, that, you know, our future is already mortgaged by 10, 15 or 20 years, for which, you know, the oil has been sold, you know, so it takes people working, you're drilling oil, and it's not your oil anymore. So that person is just there to watch and look and say, and it's been used outside of your nation. That is what we call dependency and all that. So this whole question itself is not just about who or the rest, and it's also the political economy of healthy economies and the rest of the and the future.
It took me some time to answer. You know, at the beginning I said, I've always admired the humanities. The way you think and reason and bring out concepts, for me, is very profound. And I always, when young people talk about moving to science or art class, and I see that misconception that, well, if you are very brilliant, go to science. If you are not so brilliant, go to art. I just shake my head and say, you don't know what you're saying. These people are, in quotes, crazy. You know, I'm using that in a very positive manner. So, Professor Olorunyomi talked about the womb of the earth, environment. And in nutrition, we know that every civilization that has grown and flourished has been supported by whatever grows within that geographical space. But that has been disrupted. And with that disruption has also come powerful multinationals who are controlling the marketplace of our food. So the question is, how can we use nutrition to build community mental health resilience and well-being. We need to support policies that return us back to the womb of the earth for our food. I know that globalization and cosmopolitan environmental Prophet Olaoluwa talked about, was it you that talked about grieving? Actually, our bodies are grieving. Our bodies are grieving because what we are feeding our bodies is outside the womb of the earth, where we were created. These are some very serious issues. But, like I said, the whole issue has been hijacked by powerful multinationals. And they're from outside. We are in African studies here. So I know that what I'm saying is not new to you. So if we really want to use nutrition to build mental health resilience, we need to go back to it. And sidetrack that. So, but let me leave the microphone to
Well, at this stage, I understand I have a question to answer here. Can Extalgia help us diagnose the mental health of the future? If so, yes. If so, how? At the moment, using Extalgia, we are undertaking a multidisciplinary research involving psychiatry, medical sociology, and of course, African studies, diaspora and transnational studies. The funding is from the University of Iowa in the US. And what we are examining is trying to establish a nexus between mental health and being left behind. And now I'm sharing an anecdote from one of our colleagues in that team. He said, it's been like 10 to 15 years. He's been trying to make sense of, such cases in his clinic. Young and elderly people losing their minds, of course, becoming his patients, and being able to somehow suspect that it had something to do with being left behind by their parents, by their relations, by their children, but he wasn't just, it wasn't just, coming through for him until, he encountered and America. And the fourth and last one, who's always checking on her, has also just announced to mom that he'll be leaving for Canada or wherever. And now the mom has completely broken down, losing her mind. And it was at that point, he said, oh, there is actually this nexus between being left behind and mental health. Because generally, like I said earlier on, it's about power relations, and we all know it. You know the way you'll be welcomed by your parents and relations in your town or in your city or in your village because you are coming from Ibadan. And you also know there is a difference between the way you will be welcome and the way your brother in the US will be welcomed home. It's always been like that. We don't even think about it. So we have always associated not just power, but importance, integrity with those who migrate. A lot of power in the way we relate with them. Because we associate abundance with not being at home. I mean, if you're at home today, God forbid, and next week you're at home, you'll be surprised, and then at the end of the month, you are not able to drop something. You'll be surprised that your children will begin to become disrespectful to you because you are now at home, not participating in what in our diaspora studies we call the diaspora of the everyday. If you don't participate in the diaspora of the everyday, you are likely to lose your integrity. And in losing your integrity, you can also lose your mind, because in that case, you have been left behind by others who participate in the diaspora of the everyday. Okonkwo eventually commits suicide, I argue, not really because of himself, but because he grew up to know a father that refuses to participate in the diaspora of the everyday. When you don't participate in the diaspora of the everyday, because you stand in relation to several others, it's a kind of social contract. You are a father, for instance, so you have a wife, you have children. When you refuse to participate in the diaspora of the everyday, the indignity and ignominy that will come to you will also affect your children. For instance, they will be sent back home from school for not paying their fees. Your wife goes to market to buy something on credit and she's denied access. The shame and everything does something to them. That is exactly, yes, what it has done to Okonkwo. And then in terms of nutrition, we're talking about the future. How do you nourish the left behind? Nourishing the left behind is a function of so many things, including the political economy. For as long as the president continues to think that what we should do is remove anything that makes Nigerians comfortable, take it away. Oh, gas is cheap compared to what obtains in the US. Take it away. Petrol is cheap. Take it away. What else is cheap in Nigeria? Electricity. Take it away. It will affect those left behind and will affect them in a way that allows us to talk about double jeopardy. Double jeopardy in the sense that even when the children, that is, we assume the children have that abundance and send stuff back home, it will still not be enough for them. And do not forget, there is no amount of dollars you send back home that will account for that affective, intimate deficiency, that affective deficiency that happens when you are left behind. And that is why I have advocated in the Extalgia research that institutions, local, national, and international, have to begin to set up support systems. The equivalent of, say, your Red Cross, your IMO, and so many others, take care of those left behind. Extalgia begins at two major levels. Pre-departure extalgia. You find parents breaking down before their children travel out. That's pre-departure extalgia. There is need to begin to counsel the people who want to leave behind. That your son will be away, and this is likely to happen. So this is how to cope and all that. And then, and how they cope, that will also rest on the political economy.
Thank you so much. Please, let's professors for their contribution thus far. So that's not where we are. That's not where we are ending. We still have a couple of questions coming from the audience, both here and online. So please start collating the questions from those online. We will come to them very shortly. But from the audience, I would like to start taking your questions now or comments. Okay, Michael, I can see one hand. So let's take a couple of questions and come round. We'll assign numbers. So there's one over there, 2, 1, 2, okay, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's take the first 3.
Thank you very much. My question is very related to the question Dr. Kudus asked. the capacity to face emergent futures of being left behind. And the question is first about the agency of the unborn, and in the context of ideas. It looks like in Nigeria, the idea of free education and a good country is impossible. So instead of having conversations that can lead us to that place where we have social services, free education, free healthcare, people would rather just address other issues. Okay, so the second is about our first point, which is what your mother eats. And I think this is closely related to what Thomas Sankara said about feminism and fighting for the right of women, when he said it is not just an emotional thing, but a developmental thing. So now what you eat for me metaphorically in the sense of education is the quality of education of the mother determines the development, the lifestyle, and the intelligence of the child. So education as food or meal in that sense. So, and nurturing the womb for future crisis. Now, I asked the question about the agency of the unborn in social issues. Now, in the context of conflict, how do we nurture the womb, which is now the future, for the crisis of the ideas of the unborn, or in this context, free education, free healthcare, and those who believe that these things have to be sold? That is the crisis of a certain level of socialism and neoliberal, so that it does not always get violent or does not get violent. How do we avoid the use of violence, even when we engage in the ideas of the unborn agency? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to appreciate the three professors for that. Your name? My name is Samuel Adejube. Okay. My question will be to Professor Folake Samuel on the fruit and vegetable. First and foremost, I appreciate the fact that you're able to link the sciences down to humanity and social science, which is very profound to me. Thank you so much for that. Looking at fruit and vegetable, and looking at the concept of mobility or extalgia, we discover that nowadays when everybody is jackpotting now, so people pack vegetables as whether as a sign for homeland to remember, because sometimes when they pack this thing, they pack locust beans, and even we that were here will find it difficult to eat locust beans anytime we go to maybe Teda to buy food or anywhere. There's no locust beans there. So now when they pack it, then we now discover that to even eat locally might be more expensive compared to entering to buy noodles or snacks, just snack it up. So, and then looking at the fact that everybody is leaving farming urbanization, you mentioned urbanization and this cosmopolitan issue. And I love the idea that even in Lagos, in this urban, we are going to leave rural to urban. So my question is, should we all go back to the farm? And knowing that in humanity now, researchers are all also advised to go into policy making and not just research for the library alone. So I'm asking, is there, because when we look at policy now, should we all go back to the farm? And then again, it's also come back to the idea of insecurity we have in the country, and the idea of everybody living, going to urban settings to do white collar job, people living, moving out, and the little farm produce that we have is now being packed and being sent out. And because of that, you get to OJ market or Bodija market to get farm produce directly from the farm, even in the morning, every morning, early morning, they used to go there in Bodija. It's expensive now. So what do you suggest? And then we need to balance this, people who still want white collar job and then the farm farmers. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Oyebanke. So my question, because most mothers are not eating anything. In my own, these people, if they are not reading and they don't know where or what they want to fight for, rather what they just want to do is social media engagement and get the contest for likes and retweets. I hope we are not in grief already with Extalgia. So my question is, how do we, like presently, with Gen Zs?
Responses for.
Thank you very much. The issue of Gen Z is very important. It's one of those things that we've been looking at in the department, especially around issues of breastfeeding. But we are careful not to be judgmental. What we are seeing is that with the issue of wombiture and the responsibility of the womb to nurture the future generation, and if I may, the future, for us, it is placing or highlighting a big responsibility of the female. Because a female is a man with a womb. Nature has placed that responsibility on us. So what we need to do is to bring Gen Zs and other women into that space where they will understand the, if I may use the word, sacredness of that assignment. But not just that, we must also convince them that there is support, because that's what people are actually fighting against. Nature has placed this on us. Culture is also placing its own demands on us. We need to cook. We need to do everything domestic. Why? So we have to come to that place of dialogue and compromise between all genders to say that if this particular gender has that natural role and responsibility, how do we support? How do we support? So it's not just letting them know that this is what you should do. For example, people are resenting breastfeeding now. You say everybody is concerned about the child that is being breastfed. Nobody's talking about the mother. So these are the different areas that we need to really work on. In fact, the mental health of women in terms of their care of children, pregnancy, that's another big issue on its own. So there's a lot of overlapping issues that we need to look at. Dr. Adejube talked about fruits and vegetables and so many issues around by saying that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the very bottom, when we apply it to food habits, it's just to eat for survival. That's where we are now in the country. And before we now start moving to Maslow's hierarchy of needs that has to do with identity, you know, where people are abroad and they eat certain foods as an expression of their things. We need to come back a little bit and see what exactly is happening. Are the economic forces not too strong for us? Or are we also, in some cases, greedy? Also, but I beg to disagree. All we need to know is to tap into nature's seasonality. If you look at fruits and vegetables, every month there is a particular food that is in season. At that point, it is plenty, it is fresh, it is cheap. That pack that is in your hand, can anybody please guess the cost plus the packaging, plus everything.
In dollars.
In naira, please. 2,000. Okay, it is 720 naira. Yes, with the pack. Because we understand seasonality. You understand those things. So I also am guilty because I think this information should be made more public. You should know more of this kind of secrets, you know, that can really help people. So sometimes it's not that eating healthy or eating traditional is really expensive. It's because the other forces are more powerful. It's easier to see a packet of noodles than to see a bowl of garden egg, for example. So we have a lot of work to do to actually push these things forward. Those of us in science, we need to move out and engage with those in humanities and social sciences who know how to pass across messages, who know how to communicate issues. That is one thing that I think we should take away from this in the University of Ibadan. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, we really have to do a lot, and I think I have to now speak like a probably brought up boy of my father, where it is necessary to cater to the needs of our women. We cannot be talking about the future and then we say it is what the mother eats that the child becomes when we do not even care for the mother in the first place. We really have to show a lot of concern, and it goes beyond just making the provisions. It also has something to do with how do we cope in the domestic sphere. For instance, last weekend, I go home and, you know, it was the girl versus, and the boys only in the kitchen. I mean, we left, you know, our girls, we were watching the TV, and my son and I joined the mother in the kitchen. Okay, so you can walk, you can eat. I've just been told. I've also gotten an additional role as a continuity announcer. Now you feel free to eat your food. It's been washed with salt, so you're good. So not quite. Yeah. So you're good. And so we felt the girls should you know, do their DSTV stuff. And then the boys were in the kitchen to take care of everything. That is symbolic, and that is also necessary for all of us because the dynamics keep on changing. We've gone past that age where the father just comes back to the sitting room and holds the remote control. Then the mother, who's also been away for as many hours or more, do all. And this is also part of how we can assure the future. And this is also part of how the grief of extalgia will not overwhelm us, despite the political economy of Tinubu at the moment that tends to render everybody vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think we'll take the first of the last responses for this round of questions. So we'll very briefly, and then get some questions online.
Okay, yeah, I think it was Oyebanke and someone else who called attention to how do we connect this with Gen Zs and the role of education and nutrition. Well, I think the first in the structure of the way I understand the principles that led me to Wombiture, because in itself, Wombiture did not just start as Wombiture, it started also as in 1986.
I can't go that far back. The most important thing is my first encounter with laptop, and I mean I've read it in sci-fi and the rest. I was to take something to Inaugural, early 80s. Collect the papers, and the Senate was working on the computer, and was pacing back and forth, and was complaining about the invasion of something by virus. Virus invade to ensure that the louvers are open. Because I declared him mad. He kept pacing. I said, where are the materials? He said, virus invaded. Yeah. How could virus? It was not a piece of meat. So, and then I got more and more and more into this. Now, I discovered the question of the next generation. Good for that excitement into the story. But the core thing, but how we get the generation that's next and order, we'll have to totally recalibrate. And I like to plead with my colleagues here, Professors Samuel. By the way, my senior professor, there's no such thing in the university, and a much earlier professor, Professor Senayon, and the rest of my colleagues here. I think we'll have to totally recalibrate the whole game of how we move on the communication of knowledge. From my own study, so it's so easy for me to say Gen Z, blah, 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 blah. We are dealing with, since the beginning of the IT revolution, with a generation that will naturally, in very many contexts, have more information than us. Because all other earlier generations, based on research, this is the outcome of research, have been based on how long you lived. You couldn't do anything about your child except your grandma or your mom was there. Before it became what do you call digital, please let me just stretch that single line. It's just one single line. The digital. It was unthought of that you go to a place for 7 years and be telling your mom, the compaction of the medical school. So I'm saying there's nano of this. And we're at the height of it at this point in time. So young people will be like they are more rude, they are more this, and so teachers have to be, is the person that has the strongest spine for the first time, not the older person in age. The person that has the strongest spine that will have more information. So it depends on how you can therefore interact with young people, the degree to which otherwise you are sabotaged. So I think this is where the whole Gen Z thing comes. I see people appointed to become, I mean, so what do you want to do in Queenshall? What do you have no clue, man. You are never in the bar, So this is a crisis. So you need to find, some degree.
All right, thank you, sir. That's a very long journey, a way to travel to not have an answer in the end. Well, that is the nature of professors. So we have some questions tonight. I'd like to read some of them out. Okay. Wow. Okay. Okay, the questions been projected. So The very first one, and this, I think this one is likely directed to Professor Senayon. Question from Professor Jendele Ugo. He said, which one is more significant, collective or individual agency in dealing with the problems arising from the many strands of migration? Please, have you taken note of that? Thank you. Is saying quite a robust discourse. I must say this breaks the boundaries of dictionary essentialism. I think that one constant factor that conditions the dialectics of womb, nature, and extalgia is the socio-psychology of nature versus culture, if indeed there's such distinct demarcation in the first place. How do we navigate these socio-psychology in the framing of womb as foundation for nurture and more, which is fundamental for enhancing a balance in these dialectics, nature or culture? I think Professor Olorunyomi will take that. Okay, yeah, I think.
Very, very briefly, the social psychology of the womb, nurture dialectic. I think it's the first thing the contributor said is that Dr. Osheri. Okay, thanks also for quickly alerting us that we should be mindful of, we should be careful of this. I think this is key. In this spirit, that I also like to say that when beginnings, I do not mean the beginning. Otherwise, that's the closure of time-space. Have such powers. So just encourage to go to foundations that can help us understand debates. And I do not also suggest a epistemological foundationalism that is that is fixed boundaries all of the time. The thing I just like to say is that this concept for me will be at a level literal and at other levels. See how the intersect call attention to the issue of, I didn't say the unborn. Temporary spaces.
Out. So you are taking gold. And I said, how soon will that grow back there? Not rich. You are taking things and they are using to plaster your house, your handsets and the rest. So what is the next direction of use? You know, I mean, honestly, we may not do some of those things. We don't need to just in 100 years destroy what has been there for millions of years. Maybe these kinds of thinking will make us a lot more humble.
Thank you very much. So with that, I'd like to thank Professor as well as thank Professor Samuel and Professor Senayon for taking the time to engage us and share ideas. From this part, I would like to thank the audience, physically and online, for the participation. We can't take further questions now, but I'm sure that at some point there are people that we are familiar with and they'd like to chat, you know, on the floors, you know, in front of the aspects, anyways. So before I hand over my mic, online, okay, please can you project that? But before that, I'd like to recognize the presence of Dr. Shadi Pejo, the head department of nutrition. And then online, obviously they are checking the time and over. Yes, so please appreciate everyone for their presence. Really thank you. And I'd love to thank you, everyone. Would you Tayo,
yeah. Well, I think both of things have been done. I would love to first and foremost to Inaugural Professorial Chats. Like you know, this wouldn't have been an individual effort, and so I'd like to thank those who helped drive this. Of course, you have to be tax. As well, and Dr. Wale was saying who has to go was some that also went out of their way to provide, to see to it that something in place. So we have to thank Professor JT from the US. Also, unfortunately, but I want them to communicate all of these people and also give some relations, to us. Personally, I'm a great mentor and friend. When we even without information, and at least we are here today to start and this conversation. We're hoping that brings us together to come and discuss their work. The idea of this, if I could just end on that note, is the fact that we want to hear what scholars have been up to in their own words, and want to see how we can create linkages across disciplines in all of these efforts that we are making. And from these kinds of interactions, we are hoping that the Englishes people will say new knowledges, so can be derived from some of these efforts. So we are hoping that we could have subsequent editions that will also help to find the members of knowledge, not just on this campus, but globally. So we could have hybrid representations at some point. Thank you very much for joining us, and good to have you.
Thank you, and that will be all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. What's the